This audio reading is taken from the book Words of Wisdom for Daily Life by Charles Spurgeon. Our selected reading is entitled, Keep Your Own Garden. It is well for a man to see to his cattle, and look well to his flocks and to his herds. But let him not forget to cultivate that little patch of ground that lies in the centre of his being. Let him educate his head and intermeddle with all knowledge, but let him not forget that there is another plot of ground called the heart, the character, which is more important still. Right principles are spiritual gold, and he that hath them, and is ruled by them, is the man who truly lives. He hath not life, whatever else he hath, who hath not his heart cultivated and made right and pure. Have you ever thought about your heart yet? Oh, I do not mean whether you have palpitations. I am no doctor. I am speaking now about the heart in its moral and spiritual aspect. What is your character, and do you seek to cultivate it? Do you ever use the hoe upon those weeds which are so plentiful in us all? Do you water those tiny plants of goodness which have begun to grow? Do you watch them to keep away the little foxes which would destroy them? Are you hopeful that yet there may be a harvest in your character which God may look upon with approval? I pray that we may all look to our hearts. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Pray daily, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. For if not, you will go up and down in the world and do a great deal. And when it comes to the end, you will have neglected your noblest nature, and your poor starved soul will die that second death, which is the more dreadful because it is everlasting death. How terrible for a soul to die of neglect! How can we escape who neglect this great salvation? If we pay every attention to our bodies, but none to our immortal souls, how shall we justify our folly? God save us from suicide by neglect. May we not have to moan out eternally, They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. Now pass over that point and think of another vineyard. Are not some people neglecting their families? Next to our hearts, our households are the vineyards which we are most bound to cultivate. I shall never forget a man whom I knew in my youth, who used to accompany me at times in my walks to the villages to preach. He was always willing to go with me any evening, but I did not need to ask him, for he asked himself, until I purposely put him off from it. He liked also to preach himself much better than others liked to hear him, but he was a man who was sure to be somewhere to the front if he could. Even if you snuffed him out, he had a way of lighting himself up again. He was good-natured and irrepressible. He was, I believe, sincerely earnest in doing good. But two boys of his were well known to me, and they would swear horribly. They were ready for every vice, and were under no restraint. One of them drank himself into a dying state with brandy, though he was a mere boy. I do not believe his father had ever spoken to him about the habit of intoxication, though he certainly was sober and virtuous himself. I had no fault to find with him except this grave fault, that he was seldom at home, was not master of the house, and could not control his children. Neither husband nor wife occupied any place of influence in the household. They were simply the slaves of their children. Their children made themselves vile, and they restrained them not. This brother would pray for his children at the prayer meeting, but I do not think he ever practiced family prayer. It is shocking to find men and women speaking fluently about religion, and yet their houses are a disgrace to Christianity. I suppose that none of you are as bad as that, but if it be so, please spell this text over. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. The most careful and prayerful father cannot be held accountable for having wicked sons, if he has done his best to instruct them. The most anxious and tearful mother cannot be blamed if her daughter dishonours the family, provided her mother has done her best to train her up in the right way. But if the parents cannot say that they have done their best, and their children go astray, then they are blameworthy. If any have boys and girls they do not know where, let them go quickly and look them up. If any readers exercise no parental discipline nor seek to bring their children to Christ, I do implore them to give up every kind of public work till they have first done their work at home. Has anybody made you a minister and you are not trying to save your own children?
I tell you, sir, I do not believe that God made you a minister.
For if he had, he would have begun with making you a minister to your own family. They made me the keeper of the vineyards. They ought to have known better, and you ought to have known better than to accept the call. How can you be a steward in the great household of the Lord when you cannot even rule your own house? A Sunday school teacher teaching other people's children and never praying with her own. Is not this a sad business? A teacher of a large class of youths who never has taken a class of his own sons and daughters. Why, what will he do when he lives to see his children plunged into vice and sin, and remembers that he has utterly neglected them? I know not where this knife may cut, but if it wounds, I pray you do not blunt its edge. Do you say that this is very personal? It is meant to be personal, and if anybody is offended by it, let him be offended with himself and mend his ways. No longer let it be true of any of us, they made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. This concludes our reading. Thank you for listening.